And what I want to argue in this lecture is that early Methodism really had two different sets of connections. There was a set of Anglican connections that were already given in the Church of England in John Wesley's time. Those were more or less presupposed by people in Methodist societies. And then there was a unique set of Methodist connections, classes, bands, societies, and other groupings that John Wesley himself had put together. So I want to consider those together, and I think it would be fair to say that United Methodism today is facing a kind of crisis of connectionalism. We keep hearing rumors about possible divisions in the denomination. That's one kind of crisis of connectionalism. But one thing that's been happening consistently over recent decades is that although church budgets have continued to rise, quite contrary to what a lot of people say, budgets have continued to rise through the denomination, the national level and international level budgets have continued to shrink. That is to say, we've continued to put funding towards the local and regional levels of the church and not toward the national and international levels of the church, as we had done very strongly at the middle of the 20th century. That's a different kind of crisis of connectionalism. This was originally a lecture at a Virginia annual conference group that meets together annually for Wesleyan and Methodist studies, and it was entitled The Wesleyan Paradigm of Connectionalism. So I want to consider both the broader contemporary crises that we have with respect to connectional institutions and maybe the peculiarly Methodist and even peculiarly United Methodist nuances to the crises that we are facing today in our time. The broader cultural crisis within which our crisis falls can be called the postmodern crisis of unity and particularities, or unity and diversities. Since the early 1970s, modern political, religious, and cultural institutions seem to have consistently fallen apart or lost momentum to a rising tide of movements stressing ethnic, regional, national, linguistic, religious, and gender particularities. Maybe the old Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was only the most obvious of these now old-fashioned modern entities to fall beyond the cry of national and ethnic particularities. And younger students, if you don't know what the USSR, or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was, look it up in Wikipedia. But we've seen much more broadly how older unities have lost momentum in the face of the mounting assertiveness of particularities. The struggles to maintain any semblance of unity within the Democratic Party or the Republican Party in the United States might be close examples and parallels of this crisis in our national political life. But I would say it's very, very widespread, and religious institutions are no exception. In the middle of the 20th century, almost all of the effort was toward the ecumenical movement, the movement for Christian unity. I would say since the 1970s, there's been a consistent movement that says what's really important is Methodist, what's really important is being Presbyterian, what's really important is being Lutheran, and we seem to lose the sense that being Christian is really fundamental to our identities as United Methodists. I would say, maybe being Christian is more important than being Methodist or Lutheran or Presbyterian or Catholic or something like that. The way in which this postmodern crisis of unity and particularities has faced old line denominations, one of the ways has been the caucusization of denominational life, dividing the denomination up into smaller pressure groups that are advocating for different positions along the way. But that's just another sign of the general crisis of unity and particularities that we face today. Connectionalism is a term that many Methodists deeply, especially older Methodists, deeply value. If you get a question about connectionalism from an older member of your annual conference board of ordained ministry, you better believe that they're looking for something extremely positive in your response. It's that sense that we are not like the Baptists, we are not like the Presbyterians, we don't just go out there and hire our own clergy, we are connectional, and we do things at a connectional level as a denomination, as opposed to these congregationally oriented groups or groups that put the emphasis on presbyteries and so forth. So this is a particular crisis for Methodists as we face this postmodern crisis of unities and particularities. There have been some overreactions to that, but that's the general context in which I'm going to place these reflections. What I hope is that this will give you not only some thoughts about our history back in the 18th century, but also some thoughts about the present status of the United Methodist Church today.